So now we need to study the Sri Lankan system. Now they have put France and Sri Lanka as the reformed unitary formats. It's because there's something common about Sri Lanka and France. It's the fact that Sri Lanka and France, both countries, are unitary countries where uh, we haven't compromised the unitary nature, but we divided power. We have applied devolution of power. So Sri Lanka and France both have applied the best format to divide power within a unitary state, unitary country without compromising unitary status, right? So the only difference is that one difference is that the uh, British devolution of power system is quite successful. You can see that Scotland has pretty much good powers. Then Northern Ireland also has some reasonable powers. Wales is the one that doesn't, but it's okay. Wales never asked for right power. But compared to that, in Sri Lanka, the mechanism we have used for devolution of power is the provincial councils. And you guys know that as we studied in the 12th unit, that provincial councils are not very powerful. Now, that's number one, the fact that we are not very powerful in terms of provincial councils. And the other one is that in Britain, you have asymmetrical power sharing. In Sri Lanka, what we have is symmetrical power sharing. Each provincial council has the same set of powers, so they are equal from to one another. Then in this lesson, in this note, you will come across the fact that the um, Sri Lanka's devolution of powers, it's a result of two main things. Number one is the Indo-Lanka Peace Accord. This sort of it was like forced on us by India during during a landmark time of the world, the Elam War, civil war in Sri Lanka. Then, secondly, the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment was added to the Constitution as a result of the Indo-Lanka Peace Accord. So that will be there in the note. Other than that, in terms of historical development, you need to know that the 1833 Colebrook reforms is like a landmark in this, because the power devolution was required to Sri Lanka because of our ethnic identities, that we are a plural society because of that. And that's the main argument for power devolution in Sri Lanka, the fact that we have a plural society. And in 1833, the intensity between ethnicities was created by the Colebrook Commission with the introduction of communal representation. Other than that, in terms of administration, it's important to keep in mind that uh, the British people captured upcountry and lower country at two different instances, and because of that, they had like two different um, layers of administrations going on at that time for upcountry and lower country. So the Colebrook Commission unified that, and they divided the country into like 5 provinces for administration purpose only. So there was no devolution of power during the British times, and there was no devolution of power during Salisbury and 72 also. Even in the 70 original constitution, devolution of power was not there until the 13th Amendment came. Also, it is important to keep in mind that um, that the 3 stages of power devolution in Sri Lanka during the last few years of colonial times, the Donoughmore times, the minorities were asking for 50-50 representation in the legislature. Then from Salisbury until like mid-70s, they were asking for federalism or a political solution that comes close. And following the mid-70s, they were fighting for separatism and for a separate state, sort of turned into a state formation conflict. And following that, the war occurred, and at a peak time of the war, this Indo-Lanka Peace Accord occurred. And after that, the 13th Amendment was added, and the provincial councils were introduced to Sri Lanka. And then, in terms of provincial councils, you need to keep in mind this is like establishing a small cabinet system in each province of Sri Lanka, where you have a provincial council, which is the legislature, and whoever has the majority become the chief minister, and 4 of his friends, 4 of his party people become other ministers, which is the real executive of the relevant province. And these people are appointed by the governor, the provincial governor, who's the nominal executive. for that relevant province, and this governor is appointed by the president, the executive president of the central government. So we studied in the 12th unit, separately for 13th amendment, that this governor represents the president, and the president has authority over the provincial council because of the existence of the governor, and the fact that the judicial review power can be used by the Supreme Court to reverse any statute that is passed by the provincial council and all that, and that they are, and of course the central government legislature can pass something with a two-third majority, which applies to all the provincial councils, etc. These things make the provincial councils reasonably powerless. And other than that, you need to be aware of the three lists. The powers are divided: the provincial council list, the reserved list, and the concurrent list. And basically, this is identical to the Indian system because India was the country that sort of forced the system on us. So it's sort of a carbon copy of the Indian system. And you have like a very detailed explanation of these three lists, which is not necessary to go through. Like you can pretty much, you can write what's there in those three lists with the common sense. If you take off like national import matters, they are in the reserved list. Very minor stuff, basic stuff in the provincial council list, and the moderate things in the reserved, the concurrent list, right? Okay, so Kezia, you should read the note where it starts from Sri Lanka and provincial councils and devolution, that part. Then they explain how the power is devolved. It says how power is devolved, devolution and decentralization. That part Ketu should read. And after that, you can see the provincial council has like really long list. So you can basically read the first 3 points in each list and move to the paragraph after that. Understand? Okay. Then you have last topic called legislature and the executive of the provincial council, and the overview, which should come back to Kezia. Okay. Kezia, you can start. Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka also provides an example of a unitary state that has incorporated devolution within its constitutional structure. This change began with the 13th Amendment introduced to the 1978 Constitution in 1987. The structural foundations for Sri Lanka's modern centralized state were laid during the British colonial rule. The first step towards the island's political unification was the unification of the areas under the Kandyan Kingdom with the rest of the country through the Declaration of 1818. The Colebrook-Cameron reforms of 1833 unified the island administratively and judicially. Donoughmore reforms of 1931 and the Salisbury Constitution of 1947 further consolidated the unitary foundations of the modern Sri Lankan state. The Salisbury Constitution did not characterize the Sri Lankan state as a unitary state. However, the structure of the state is laid down was unitary and centralized. It closely followed the British model of a unitary constitution. The first constitutional characterization of the Sri Lankan state as a unitary one was made in 1972 in the first Republican Constitution of Sri Lanka. Article 2 of the 1972 Constitution reads, "The Republic of Sri Lanka is a unitary state." The 1978 Constitution also continued this clause. The 13th Amendment to the 1978 Constitution, enacted in 1987, introduced a change to the unitary and centralized character of Sri Lanka's constitutional model. The change was effected within a framework of devolution. Devolution is not federalism. As a framework of power sharing between the central government and the provinces, it offers a less powers than in the federal alternative. The autonomy it offers to provinces is more than in a unitary model and less than in a federal model. Therefore, Unitary constitutions with devolution can be categorized as hybrid constitutions. Characterized as hybrid constitutions. In Sri Lanka too, it was the ethnic problem that provided that the context for the unitary constitution to be altered to accommodate devolution. Sri Lanka's ethnic problem has evolved through three stages. First, during the mid-1930s, Sri Lanka's Tamil political leadership demanded for the minorities what was called balanced representation in the state council. The argument advanced by the Tamil leadership was that in order to avoid the political dominance of the Sinhalese politicians under the system of universal franchise, the majority Sinhalese community on one hand and all the ethnic minorities on the other hand should have balanced or equal representation in the state council. This was also called 50-50 demand. This was the phase of representational demands. The second phase was the period of federal demand, which began in the early 1950s and continued till the late 1970s. It was at the 1952 parliamentary election that the Federal Party of Sri Lankan Tamil started campaigning for a federal constitution. The argument advanced by the Tamil leaders was that since the Tamil-speaking citizens suffered discrimination in the independent Sri Lanka's the northern and eastern provinces, which were the majority provinces of the Tamil-speaking people, they should be given regional autonomy through a federal constitution. Although not implemented, the Bandaranayake Chelvanayagam Pact of 1957 and Senanayake Chelvanayagam Pact of 1965 marked two important signposts of Sri Lanka's journey towards altering its unitary state structure. In both occasions, the Sinhalese and Tamil leaders agreed to establish a system of power sharing which was less than federalism. The proposed regional units of power sharing were to be called regional councils and they were to be set up in the northern and eastern provinces. These two proposals were withdrawn due to opposition. The third phase of ethnic civil war after 1983. It lasted till 2009. It was during this period that steps were taken to reform Sri Lanka's unitary state. The Indo-Lanka Accord, signed by Sri Lanka's president and India's prime minister in July 1987, was an important landmark in this process. The accord laid down the following principles to reform the Sri Lankan state: recognition that Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic society, acknowledgement that the northern and eastern provinces as the traditional homeland of the Tamil-speaking people, setting up a provincial council for the two provinces after merging them. Under the 13th Amendment, these provisions of the accord were introduced to the 1978 Constitution. It created a constitutional arrangement for devolution in Sri Lanka. The 13th Amendment established devolution and provincial councils not only for the North and East, but also for the other provinces as well. The extent of devolution introduced by the 13th Amendment is less than a federal framework. However, it was an important landmark in the process of constitutional evolution in modern Sri Lanka.
Me? Me?
Yes.
Yes, you.
Provincial councils and devolution. The 13th Amendment has recognized three tiers of government for Sri Lanka. Central, provincial and local. Constitutional recognition of local government is an indirect outcome of the 13th Amendment. Provincial councils are the new institutional tier between the central government and local government. Provincial councils belong to the category called devolution. The Constitution makes provincial councils a part of the overall structure of government. However, the composition and procedures of provincial councils are defined by normal law. That is, the Provincial Councils Act number 42 of 1987. It means that changing the provincial council system requires a constitutional amendment with 2/3 majority in parliament. However, the working of the provincial council system can be altered by normal law passed by parliament with a simple majority. After the introduction of devolution, there is a controversy about whether Sri Lanka is unitary or federal. Since the unitary clause of the constitution has not been altered, the legal foundation of the constitution's unitary basis has not been changed. It is not a federal constitution since it does not have all the federal features. It is still a unitary constitution with certain federal features. That is why the concept a hybrid unitary constitution provides a better description. How power is devolved, devolution and decentralization. It is important for us to know at this point the difference between devolution and decentralization. Sri Lanka has had decentralization much before devolution. Decentralization refers to bringing administrative system away from the center to the regions and outside provinces as well as districts. It decentralizes only the administrative powers, whereas devolution decentralizes political power. Political power includes legislative, executive, and judicial powers. Examples of administrative decentralization are the system of district secretariats and divisional secretariats. Local government is also a form of decentralization of administration. Decentralized institutions are mere implementing agencies of policies made by central government. In contrast, provincial councils have powers to make policies and enact laws on certain subjects to be implemented within the province. The 13th Amendment elaborates Sri Lanka's devolution under 3 lists of powers: provincial council list, reserved or central list, and concurrent list. This method of 3 lists is similar to the Indian Constitution. Provincial Council list of powers. This list includes powers over police and public order, provincial planning, local government. This is a fairly extensive list of devolved powers to provincial councils. Although provincial councils have powers over the police and law and order, that power does not include the subjects of national security or deployment of national military units. In maintaining law and order within the province, the provincial police should function under the direction and supervision of the National Inspector General of Police. This provincial police is headed by a Deputy Inspector General of Police, who is seconded to the province from the National Police Service. Although the provinces have power to establish provincial police commissions as a part of devolution, this provision has not yet been implemented. Thus, the devolution of police powers is largely limited to the Constitution. On the question of Landu, so what is Landu?
Land what?
Landu.
Where?
It's page 50 for me.
In the list?
Yes, after the list, the 4th paragraph, sir.
Read from the beginning of the paragraph.
This is a fairly extensive list of devolved powers to provincial councils. Although provincial councils have powers over police and law and order, that power does not include the subjects of national security or deployment of national military units. In maintaining law and order, in law and order within the province. The provincial police should function under the direction and supervision of the National Inspector General of Police. The provincial police is headed by a Deputy Inspector General of Police, who is seconded to the province from the National Police Service. Although the provinces have power to establish provincial police commissions as a part of devolution, this provision has not been implemented. Thus, the devolution of police powers is largely limited to the Constitution. On the question of land
powers.
On the question of land powers, there is continuing dispute over the land powers of provincial councils. According to the Constitution, land belonging to the Republic belongs to the central government. However, the clause 1.2 of the Schedule 2 of the 13th Amendment says that the utilization of government land by central government and the provincial councils should utilize the land on an agreement between the two entities. According to clause 1.2 of the Schedule 2, it is the responsibility of the central government to provide land to the provincial councils for development projects. If any land within the jurisdiction of the provincial council is given to an individual or an organization, that requires the consent of the provincial council. Provincial councils also have important powers over education. They have the power to monitor and manage schools other than those of the central government or national schools. Personnel management in the education sector should be done in accordance with the limitations of the national system of the personnel management.
Okay, hold on, pause. Now, this land story, the land powers, there's a continuing dispute over land powers of provincial council because not only land, police powers also. As you can see, police and public order is given to provincial councils, and land and irrigation also given to provincial councils. But these two are practically not given to provincial councils. In practicality, what happens is central government has kept these two also in the reserved list. So it's a violation of the constitution. It's a violation of constitutionalism, right? So this is another problem, right? If you guys remember, the thing is, these powers actually should go to provincial councils according to the constitution, but the problem is actually these powers are kept by the central government. Okay, right. So Kezia, can you read the reserved list and the concurrent list and the last topic, legislation and the executive of the provincial council, and the overview? By the way, wait, when the beginning of the note Sri Lanka, in the very first point that comes after that, the structural foundation for Sri Lanka's modern centralized state was laid during the British colonial rule. Basically, the first point that came under Sri Lanka. There it is mentioned Kandyan Kingdom, under the Kandyan Kingdom with the rest of the country through the declaration of 1818, which is incorrect. It should be 1815. No? The Kandyan Declaration was signed in 1815 to hand over the Kandyan Kingdom to the British. Okay, so correct that also, and then you can start reading from the reserve list.
Reserved list. The following is the list of subjects reserved for the central government. It includes defense and national security, foreign affairs, post and telecommunication. These are subjects of national importance. Any subject that has not been specifically mentioned in any of the three lists will also be a subject in the reserved list. Concurrent list. Concurrent list is the subjects over which both the central government and provincial councils have joint powers for making laws and implementation. There are 36 such subjects in the concurrent list of the 13th Amendment. However, if there is a conflict between laws enacted by the central government and a provincial council on any subject, the central laws will prevail. The following are the main subjects in the concurrent list: planning, higher education, education and education services, national housing construction. Legislature and the executive of the provincial council. The 13th Amendment does not give provincial councils powers to make laws. They have powers to make statutes. Statutes have the same effect of law, but the difference is that they are valid only within the relevant province. This statute-making power of the provincial council is exercised through the council elected by the voters within the province. The legislature of a province is unicameral. Members of the council are elected for a term of 5 years. The number of members for a particular council is decided by the national parliament, taking into consideration the population and the territorial size of the province. According to the 13th Amendment, the executive of a provincial council consists of provincial governor, chief minister, and the 5 members of member council of ministers. The governor of a provincial council is the representative of the president. He or she is the head of the provincial executive. He or she acts on the advice of the council of ministers. Governor has power other than ceremonial powers. Among the powers of the governor are returning the provincial statutes to the council for reconsideration, referring the provincial statutes to the Supreme Court to determine their constitutionality, reserving the statutes for the opinion of the President. Provincial councils have very little power over the governor. The only control is passing a no confidence motion against the governor by a two-thirds majority of members of the council, including those who are not present. The actual executive authority of the council is with the chief minister and the council of ministers. Chief minister is the member of the council who enjoys the confidence of the majority of council members. But what happens actually is that the political party, which has the majority of members in the council, decides who should be the chief minister, and the other members follow that decision. Members of the Council of Ministers are appointed on the advice of the Chief Minister. Here too, what happens in reality is that the political party decides who should be the ministers. Overview. The 13th Amendment shows that Sri Lanka's constitutional structure has moved away from its unitary model. However, the unitary clause of the Constitution remains unchanged. Similarly, the Supreme Court has reaffirmed that the Constitution remains unitary. If the provincial councils are given full powers over police and land, Sri Lanka's system of devolution can come somewhat closer to the Indian model of power sharing.
Right. Any questions? I think this is pretty clear because these things we discussed for the 12th unit also when we were studying 13th Amendment. It's pretty much the same thing. Some new information revolving around the stuff you all already knew. So we only have to finish France, which is the easiest out of all these. And if you have any questions, please ask. No questions?
Sir,
Yes.
I might be wrong, okay? I might be wrong for sure.
No,
but in that legislature and executive of the provincial council, that heading, in the third para, it says chief minister and the 5-member council of ministers.
Yeah.
What's that? Is it 4 or 5? I don't get that part.
It's 4. Chief minister. Now the word "and" is the one that creates a confusion here.
Yeah.
There's the word "and"
so it should be
with including.
Okay. Okay, so
So
it's
5
chief
members,
minister.
5 ministers, including the chief minister.
Okay, okay.
Okay, if not, just make
Okay.
that 5 4. Chief minister and 4
That's better for
members.
me. Okay, okay.
Understood.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank
If you
you.
want, you can mention the 4 ministers also for like what are the ministries they have. Each provincial council has a minister of education, minister of transport, minister of health, minister of agriculture. Those are the only 4 ministries they get. All
Education, transport, health, and agriculture.
agriculture,
Okay. Thank you, sir.
yeah. Right. No other questions, right? Okay. 5 minutes break. At 5:05, let's start the French Constitution, which we can finish quite soon because it's very easy.